The economy is roaring. Joe, clearly, if the election's about the economy, the government gets returned. The media doesn't want it to be about it. But if the reality for Australians is more jobs, bigger economy and more money at home, that's going to decide the election.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the general rule of thumb is as long as the economy's going well and the government gets re-elected. I think the difference here is you've had an unprecedented churn in government. So we've had obviously 3 prime ministers in as many terms, and again another 2 prime ministers on the other side, on the Labor side, in as many terms. And so I don't think there's necessarily that kind of affinity with these are the guys who got us there. I think the one thing Scott Morrison will be remembered for and regarded with some affection for is, well, he got us through COVID and he got us through the pandemic and he did a pretty good job of that. That's obviously going to be tainted fairly or unfairly with the vaccine rollout. But again, what electors look for in a leader in a time of crisis is very, very different to what they look for going forward. We're a pretty selfish bunch. It's a what have you done for me lately, or what are you going to do for me next time? Sure. And I always go back to the Winston Churchill, Clement Attlee thing. Winston Churchill won World War II. He defeated Adolf Hitler, and he still got booted out of office in a landslide because the people of the UK thought, actually, now we want a welfare state, or now we want all these protections that we think Labor will give us that Churchill won't. Thanks very much for saving the entire free world, by the way, Winston. Really appreciate it. Thanks for stopping Nazism, but we'd actually like to try this guy now.
But Chris, if the reality for Australians is their house is worth more, there's a chance that a job that they lost they got back, or somebody who didn't have one got one. All of those indicators, that is beyond fertile ground. That is the first, second and third foundation of a return to government.
Look, it's very important. You want people to feel that they're getting a benefit from that, absolutely, but I think we're starting to see that. See, this is why I think the government's still in a very good position to win this election. I'd expect to see the polls tighten soon, and they haven't yet, but you've got to wait and see. But I have great faith in the good sense of the Australian public. And in the end, there's going to be 2 simple propositions at the election, and that is that the whole management of COVID and economic prosperity, which country has done this better in the world than Australia? The answer is no. No developed economy has done as well through the pandemic as Australia. So why would you want to change horses now, risk Labor? And the other one is it's a very, very perilous world at the moment. We know how aggressive China is. We've seen what's happening in Europe, and we know that Morrison and the coalition have stood up strongly on these issues. We know Labor have shown weakness at times. Would you want to risk Labor now? So it's those 2 core issues, and whether you want to risk it all at a time of peril. And I think on that basis, Scott Morrison could win a re-election. I think people underestimate how difficult it is for Labor. They've got to win seats with big margins, and never forget that Anthony Albanese is a Socialist Left faction leader from the inner west of Sydney.
He's a Socialist Left faction leader with no actual value, so it's fine. It's just, the right has written the policy platform, and it's a really good policy platform because no one knows what's in it.
I believe in aspiration and prosperity and choice in the economy.
No, Albo has, in all seriousness, Albo has been good like that. And I think if you're going to kick Bill Shorten in the nuts, for example, for introducing a whole bunch of new taxes, the negative gearing stuff, which never ever works in Australia. Memo to politicians: don't touch negative gearing. Okay, it's baked into our way of life.
But hang on. Sorry, Sharri, but I'll get to you in a second here. But hang on. He also said we should buy an airline. He also said we should bribe people.
You've already been vaccinated to get vaccinated.
The vaccine thing was a teeny tiny bit silly, but again, in the context of when that was said, that was before we knew there was a buyer for Virgin, and before we knew the private sector would step in. And I think there's maybe an argument that an airline is
it's about judgment. They constantly have the wrong
But an aviation industry is a natural duopoly, and you want to make sure there are 2 players in it. And if that meant the government providing some assistance or keeping it going until another buyer could be found, I don't think that's as crazy as it might at first sound. The vaccination stuff, there was a real issue with people from certain backgrounds and people who were struggling to make ends meet and struggling to work, and people, frankly, in the suburbs very near where I live, who were reluctant to get vaccinated and were worried about their hip pockets, as they should be and had a right to be, and which is why they should not have been put through what they were.
But Joe, the issue...
maybe that could help.
Yeah, Sharri, jump in.
But Joe, the issue with Albanese isn't the Labor Party's policies. It's that he has spent the majority of his career, of his political life, and he's been in politics for over 30 years. He has spent this entire time as a radical left in the Socialist Left of the Labor Party. So in his heart of hearts, what he believes, what his values are, what he has stood for, what he has argued for over the best part of 30 years are very radical policies, and the most extreme being death taxes. But there's a long list of them that he has strongly argued for. And so it's fine that he's abandoned all of Bill Shorten's unpopular policies from 2019. But when he presents himself to the Australian people do have a right to question who he is. And in the future, when difficult decisions come up, people want to know how he's going to lean. And at the same time, Labor has been relying on this being an election, a referendum on Scott Morrison. But, in New South Wales, we haven't had masks since Friday in indoor settings. And so as we move further and further away from the pandemic and this becomes a distant memory, people are going to forget that they couldn't get rat tests or that we were slow to the vaccines. So. National security is becoming a much bigger issue, not just with Russia, but with China as well. And who knows how this is going to continue unfolding, what Putin will do next in the months ahead. So it's national security and it's the economy that are becoming the main themes, not how Scott Morrison did during the pandemic. And for this reason, I'm with Chris Kenny, and I think the election's there for Scott Morrison to win.
Yeah, that is quite possible, and I agree with Chris as well that there is a difficult path to power just with the swings in individual seats. But I will just say, look, I know Albo. He's a factional warrior. He's not an ideologue. He is factional. People who run the factions in the Labor Party are the most pragmatic people in the world. And what you want in a modern society is a pragmatic leader, a leader who looks at a problem and says, right, how do we solve this? And
he wants to be Prime Minister.
Prime Minister, exactly.
So we should buy a leader.
This is what I do.
My
problem is getting elected. What do I have to pretend to believe?
I would not be. I was not obviously particularly vocal or bullish in supporting Bill Shorten because I did not like the language that he was using and the direction that the party seemed to be going in. That was the ideological direction when, strangely, Bill, who was of the right, had his strings pulled by the Victorian Socialist Left. Albo is being run by the New South Wales right.
We don't know a lot about Labor's policies because we're kind of seeing...
Because they're exactly the same as the coalitions. That's the beauty of it.
No, it's not.
Hang on, the climate change. Hang on. I'm trying to get you off the hook here, mate. You can't argue.
Like what the media did to Biden after going too negative on Hillary, we're seeing the same thing now.
100%.
No opposition leader has had a softer run than Albanese is having now. No one is scrutinising his policies. We're still waiting for Labor to announce them, let alone cost them.